Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling strangely disoriented, almost as if your own mind had turned against you? Maybe someone looked you straight in the eye and told you that your memory was wrong, your emotions were irrational, or your interpretation of events couldn't possibly be trusted. And even though something deep inside you resisted their version of reality, another part of you started to wonder, what if they're right? What if I really am the problem? That inner confusion is not accidental. For many people who have been involved with narcissistic individuals, one of the most psychologically exhausting experiences is something known as gaslighting. It's subtle at first. In fact, it often begins so quietly that you don't even realize it's happening. But over time, the manipulation grows stronger. Little by little, your confidence erodes. Your ability to trust your instincts weakens, and eventually, you may find yourself relying more on the narcissist's interpretation of reality than your own. That is exactly the goal. Gaslighting is not merely disagreement. It's not healthy conflict. It's not two people seeing things differently and trying to work through misunderstandings. Gaslighting is a deliberate pattern of psychological manipulation designed to create confusion, self-doubt, and dependency. The narcissist wants you second-guessing yourself because confused people are easier to control. And once you understand how this tactic works, you begin to see why it can be so emotionally devastating. A narcissistic person typically operates from a deep need for superiority and control. They don't simply want influence in the relationship. They want dominance over the emotional and psychological atmosphere. They want to shape how situations are interpreted, how conversations are remembered, and ultimately, how you see yourself. If they can convince you that your thoughts are unreliable, then they gain power. If they can make you doubt your judgment, they become the authority. And if they can keep you emotionally off balance, they maintain the upper hand. What makes gaslighting so dangerous is that it rarely appears aggressive in the beginning. Many narcissists present themselves as helpful, insightful, or even protective. They position themselves as the one person who really understands you. But hidden underneath that appearance is a persistent effort to undermine your confidence while elevating themselves as the expert on your life. One of the first things you'll notice about a gaslighter is that they are fundamentally dishonest about themselves. They work hard to construct an image that portrays them as exceptionally intelligent, emotionally mature, morally superior, or constantly misunderstood by others. They exaggerate their successes and minimize their failures. If relationships in their past ended badly, there is always someone else to blame. If conflict arises, they cast themselves as the victim or the innocent party. Rarely will you hear them speak with sincere humility about their own flaws. And this matters because people who refuse to see themselves accurately will almost certainly fail to see others accurately as well. A narcissistic gaslighter often views people through a distorted lens. Instead of engaging with you as a separate human being with your own thoughts and experiences, they interpret you according to whatever narrative best supports their agenda. Their conclusions are not based on truth, they're based on control. That's why they spend so much time discrediting you. Sometimes the attacks are direct. They may criticize your personality, your intelligence, your emotional reactions, or your social interactions. You might hear statements like, "You're way too sensitive. You never understand things correctly. You embarrass yourself around people. You don't even realize how rude you are. You always overreact." At first, you may defend yourself. You may try to explain your intentions or clarify misunderstandings. But notice what happens. The more you explain, the more they reinterpret your explanations as evidence that something is wrong with you. If you become emotional, they'll say you're unstable. If you become frustrated, they'll say you have anger issues. If you calmly defend yourself, they'll accuse you of being defensive. No matter how you respond, the conclusion somehow circles back to the same message. You are the problem. Over time, these repeated criticisms begin to wear people down. Not because the accusations are necessarily true, but because constant negative reinforcement has psychological power. Human beings naturally absorb repeated messages, especially when those messages come from someone emotionally close to them. But gaslighting rarely stops with direct criticism alone. Another common tactic is involving third parties, whether truthfully or not, to strengthen the illusion that everyone sees you negatively. The narcissist might say, "Your coworkers were talking about how difficult you are. Even your family thinks you're unstable. My friends noticed how awkward you acted. People are concerned about your behavior." Often, these claims are exaggerated, distorted, or completely fabricated. But the purpose is strategic. The narcissist wants you to feel isolated. If they can convince you that multiple people share the same negative opinion of you, your self-doubt deepens. This is where many victims of gaslighting begin to lose their emotional footing. They start replaying conversations endlessly in their minds. They question their memory. They overanalyze social interactions. They become hypervigilant, constantly wondering if they unknowingly offended someone or behaved inappropriately. Eventually, they stop trusting themselves altogether. And once that happens, the narcissist's influence grows dramatically. Another hallmark of gaslighting is the narcissist's tendency to reinterpret your motives for you. Instead of allowing you to define your own intentions, feelings, or experiences, they insist on telling you what you really meant or felt. You might say, "I was just trying to help," and they respond, "No, you were trying to control the situation." You might say, "That comment hurt my feelings," and they reply, "You're just looking for attention." You might say, "I disagree with you," and they answer, "You're only saying that because you're insecure." Notice the pattern. Your inner reality is constantly being overwritten by theirs. Healthy people listen to understand. Narcissistic gaslighters listen to reinterpret. In healthy relationships, two people may disagree while still respecting each other's perspective. But gaslighters do not tolerate equal reality. They need their interpretation to dominate. That's why conversations with them often feel exhausting and circular. You try to explain yourself, but somehow your words get twisted into something completely different. And perhaps one of the most maddening aspects of all is this: they rarely take responsibility for their own behavior. If you calmly tell them that their words felt hurtful, they'll dismiss your feelings entirely. "I was only trying to help. You misunderstood me. You're imagining things. You're too emotional. It's not my fault you can't handle honesty." Instead of reflecting on how their behavior affects others, they redirect attention back onto your supposed deficiencies. Accountability becomes impossible because every issue is reframed as evidence of your weakness rather than their misconduct. This constant reversal creates tremendous emotional fatigue. Many people trapped in gaslighting dynamics begin to feel as though they are losing their identity. They become so focused on defending themselves that they forget how to simply be themselves. Their emotional energy goes into proving they're not selfish, not unstable, not incompetent, not overly sensitive. But no amount of explaining ever satisfies the narcissist, because clarity is not their objective. Confusion is. And that's why one of the most important shifts you can make is this: stop trying to convince the narcissist to understand you. That may sound counterintuitive because healthy relationships thrive on communication. Normally, when misunderstandings occur, honest conversation helps resolve them. But with a gaslighter, the conversation itself often becomes part of the manipulation. The narcissist is not searching for mutual understanding. They are searching for leverage. Every emotional explanation you give them can become ammunition later. Every vulnerable confession can be twisted into proof that you're flawed. every attempt to defend yourself keeps you emotionally engaged in a game designed for you to lose. Many people stay trapped because they believe that if they could just explain themselves clearly enough, calmly enough, compassionately enough, the narcissist would finally get it. But narcissistic gaslighting isn't caused by misunderstanding. It's caused by a need for control. And once you realize that, your strategy must change. Instead of constantly trying to change their perception of you, you must begin strengthening your own perception of yourself. This is where healing starts. You have to ask yourself, what do I actually know to be true about me? Not what the narcissist says, not what fear says, not what shame says. What do you genuinely know? Are you a caring person? Are you thoughtful? Are you trying to grow? Are you willing to admit mistakes when they are real? Do other emotionally healthy people experience you differently than the narcissist does? Because here's something critically important. Emotionally healthy people do not consistently leave you feeling confused, diminished, and psychologically disoriented. Healthy individuals may offer constructive criticism, but their feedback is grounded in respect. They don't attack your identity. They don't weaponize your vulnerabilities. They don't systematically erode your confidence in yourself. And that's why reconnecting with emotionally safe people is so essential. Gaslighting thrives in isolation. When you are cut off from supportive voices, the narcissist's version of reality becomes louder and louder. But when you reconnect with grounded, emotionally mature individuals, you begin to regain perspective. You start noticing that healthy people don't constantly criticize your character. They don't create chaos during every disagreement. They don't make you feel crazy for having emotions. Support systems matter deeply during recovery from gaslighting. Trusted friends, wise family members, support groups, counselors, and therapists can all help restore clarity. Sometimes you need emotionally objective people around you to remind you of who you are when manipulation has clouded your self-perception. And this doesn't mean you become dependent on external validation. It means you allow healthy relationships to reinforce reality instead of distortion. One of the most painful consequences of gaslighting is how it disconnects people from their intuition. Many victims stop trusting their emotional signals entirely. Even when something feels wrong, they dismiss themselves. They've been trained to believe their instincts are unreliable. But your emotions are not your enemy. Yes, emotions can sometimes become exaggerated under stress. Yes, human beings can misinterpret situations occasionally, but consistently dismissing your own inner experience creates vulnerability to manipulation. Part of healing involves relearning how to listen to yourself again. When something feels emotionally unsafe repeatedly, pay attention. When someone consistently leaves you feeling inferior, confused, guilty, or emotionally unstable after interactions, pay attention. When every conversation somehow ends with you apologizing while your concerns remain ignored, pay attention. Patterns matter. Gaslighting is rarely a one-time incident. It's an ongoing relational atmosphere. It becomes the emotional climate of the relationship itself. And eventually, you may need to face a difficult reality. Some people are simply unsafe for your psychological well-being. That does not mean they are evil monsters in every area of life. It does not mean they lack any redeeming qualities whatsoever. But it does mean their presence may be profoundly damaging to your mental and emotional health. At that point, boundaries become necessary. For some people, boundaries may involve limiting emotional vulnerability with the narcissist. For others, it may mean reducing contact. And in severe situations, it may require complete disengagement. This can be difficult because narcissistic individuals often resist boundaries intensely. Once they sense they are losing psychological control, they may escalate manipulation, guilt, anger, or victimhood narratives. They may accuse you of being selfish, cruel, disloyal, or unreasonable simply for protecting your emotional health. But protecting your peace is not cruelty. You are not obligated to remain psychologically available to someone who repeatedly distorts your reality. And one of the most liberating realizations in recovery is understanding that you do not need the narcissist's agreement in order to trust yourself. You do not need their validation to know your intentions. You do not need their approval to recognize your worth. You do not need their permission to establish emotional distance. Far too many people remain emotionally trapped because they keep waiting for the narcissist to finally acknowledge the damage they caused. They hope for accountability, insight, empathy, or genuine remorse. And while personal growth is possible for anyone willing to do serious inner work, many narcissistic individuals resist that process because it threatens the fragile identity they've spent years constructing. So waiting endlessly for transformation may keep you emotionally stuck. Sometimes healing begins when you stop asking, "How do I get them to understand me?" and start asking, "Why am I giving someone this much authority over my identity?" That question changes everything. Because healthy selfhood requires internal stability. It requires the ability to hold on to your reality even when others attempt to distort it. It means acknowledging your imperfections without allowing manipulative people to define your entire character. A gaslighter wants you trapped in chronic self-doubt. A healthy life requires grounded self-awareness. Those are two completely different things. Self-awareness says, "I'm imperfect, but I'm willing to grow." Gaslighting says, "You're fundamentally defective and incapable of understanding reality." Self-awareness produces growth. Gaslighting produces shame. And shame is one of the narcissist's favorite tools, because ashamed people become easier to control. But you do not have to live trapped in that cycle forever. You can rebuild trust with yourself. You can learn to recognize manipulative dynamics earlier. You can strengthen your emotional boundaries. You can surround yourself with healthier people. And perhaps most importantly, you can stop allowing someone else's distorted perception to become your identity. That process may take time, especially if the gaslighting lasted for years. Emotional recovery is rarely instant. There may be moments where you still question yourself, moments where the old confusion resurfaces, moments where you feel tempted to seek reassurance from the very person who destabilized you. But every time you return to your own grounded awareness, you reclaim a little more of yourself. Every time you refuse to engage in circular manipulation, you weaken the narcissist's control. Every time you honor your emotional reality instead of dismissing it, healing deepens. And eventually, something remarkable begins to happen. The fog starts lifting. You stop obsessively defending yourself. You stop explaining every decision. You stop needing constant validation. You become calmer internally because you no longer hand your psychological center over to someone committed to distorting it. And that is one of the clearest signs of recovery: peace replacing confusion. Healthy relationships do not require you to abandon yourself. Healthy love does not demand chronic self-doubt. Healthy people do not need to shrink you in order to feel powerful. So if you've been caught in a gaslighting dynamic, remember this clearly. The narcissist's interpretation of you is not the ultimate truth about you. Their criticism is not your identity. Their projections are not your character. Their confusion does not have to become your confusion. You have the right to define yourself through honesty, self-awareness, growth, and grounded reality, rather than manipulation and fear. And once you stop looking to unhealthy people for permission to trust yourself, you begin stepping back into emotional freedom. That freedom is not arrogance, it's clarity, it's stability, it's emotional independence. And after enduring the exhausting psychological warfare of gaslighting, Clarity may become one of the most healing experiences of all.